I'm Mary Claire Speckner with the library. Our presenter tonight is Charles Millman, and Charles is retired from teaching, and he retired in 2010 after 37 years with the Seymour Community Schools. Charles is a composer, photographer, and author, and currently Charles and his wife Susie are working on revamping a Ford Transit van into a camper. Yay! And also, as a side note, I worked at the library in Seymour for 20 years, and back in probably 1981, Charles was one of the first presenters we had to do a program for the public. So thanks, Charles.
Yeah.
I think it was on how to do your own video recording.
Probably.
Yeah. So in March of 2014, Charles was nearly killed in an automobile accident. And while recovering, for some odd reason, he binge watched programs on the Holocaust. And so after that, he visited the Candles Museum in Terre, Haute. He traveled with Eva Mural a couple of times. He went over to see the concentration camps on his own. And he and Eva became friends, close friends. And when Eva was here at the Commons a few years ago, Charles introduced her. So that was quite an event. We were just talking about that. And Charles is also a twin, just like Eva. Charles has presented for us before, and those talks could be considered a little more academic. And tonight's presentation is going to be just a little more personal. And now over to you, Charles. And thanks everybody for being here.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. You'll see me reaching up. I've got notes up here because I know I've got to remember to look at the camera. You all know what it's like with selfies. You're not looking at the camera. But I'd like to thank the library for Mary Claire, especially for inviting me again. I think this is probably my 4th talk, I believe. And so I've been all over the state doing that. Well, as Mary Claire said, I was a teacher, and after I retired, I wasn't expecting any of this. None of this was on my radar. But as she told you, I was watching things on Netflix while I was recovering from a wreck, and I watched a video about Eva called "Forgiving Dr. Mengele." And I met, as you'll see in the video presentation, which is coming very soon, I met her at the Candles Holocaust Museum. I think it was 2011, 2012. Didn't really know anything except the number 6 million. That's literally all I knew about the Holocaust. And so I met her, and in the video, you'll see what happened the first time I met her. She's a hoot. And we were friends. I don't like to portray it as that we were dear close friends at all, but we certainly knew each other, and we kept in contact. I think my last email from her was just a few days before she passed away over in Poland at Krakow. I'd sent her an email and told her to behave and do what the director said, Beth, and take naps. I always told her to take naps like I do. So she was a delight. And so this subject of the Holocaust is still current. And I don't even get into the political side, because you hear Holocaust and Nazism thrown around in all kinds of circles. And so I really stay away from politics altogether. There is a place for that, but not with this kind of presentation. But I just want to mention that I looked it up, and I think there's an estimate, there's at least 250,000 Holocaust survivors. Now, you have to understand it's a wide definition. I began thinking of a Holocaust survivor as someone who survived the death camp, but it also can include people who were hidden, those who escaped from Germany or Austria, or affected in any way. And you'd be hard pressed to find a Jewish family that has any relations in Eastern Europe that didn't have family members murdered one way or another in the Holocaust. And so they estimate that of those 250,000, half of them are in the US, and half of those in the US are in New York City. So we still have a lot of survivors. And one thing that's continuing about them is I wasn't aware of the profound effect survivors had on their children and grandchildren. I just didn't get the 2nd generation, 3rd generation, but some of you know families, we may be families that have had trauma of some sort, and that trauma, in a way, manner of speaking, can be passed down through families depending on how much people talk about it. So I've met survivors who never spoke about it to families. And then some, a staff member from Yad Vashem said in Israel, some families, it's like a direct IV injection every single day they hear about the Holocaust. So it's a wide range. And to close out and to get going to the video, you're going to be hearing 7 friends of mine who went either on my January 2015, summer 2015, or Romania 2018 trip. And you're going to see people who actually never spoke with Eva, but were on the trip. Because some of the trips, they can be up to 100 people, all the way to the last one's going to be a gentleman from Germany whose grandfather was Dr. Mengele's boss. He's a little difficult to understand. He's got a great German accent. You're also going to hear a gal with a British accent. And so if you have a little trouble, this video that that the library is recording will be on their Facebook page and YouTube page, and then my video will be on the Charles Moon YouTube channel. And on that one, I have some static screens at the end with some suggested books and documentaries but I decided not to include that in today's video. So, so today's video is very different from my normal academic talk, but I just wanted to focus on remembering Eva. And those of us that knew her just miss her dearly. We really do. And having said that, thank you for watching. And I think we'll start the video. It's about a 35-minute video. Hope you like it. My first time seeing the Eva Mural in person, and it's just beautiful. The artist really captured her very well. Eva really was a larger-than-life person, and what a great tribute to Eva and her life and her continuing legacy. You're looking good, Eva.
Well, before each of my talks, I like to always say that I'm not a World War II expert, I'm certainly not a Holocaust expert, and I'm not a representative of Candles or any other organization. However, I am an expert about my experiences. Well, the Holocaust is a very difficult and complex subject, but we can say this. The Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, and state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. On January 27, 1945, the Red Army liberated the death camp Auschwitz. Among the survivors they found were sets of twins. Less than 200 of 3,000 twins survived the experiments of the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele. Eva and Miriam Moses were among those twins. Their parents and older sisters were murdered at Auschwitz. Eva and Miriam survived and eventually thrived, and Eva moved to America and eventually opened up a Holocaust museum and became a forgiveness advocate and yearly brought people to Auschwitz to tell her story. Well, welcome to my talk. I'm here at Candles Holocaust Museum that was founded by Eva Kor. Here she spoke to thousands of students and adults, and they got to meet the very special person, Eva Moses Core. And behind me is a photograph of what is referred to as the Death Gate and the selection platform where Eva last saw her family. And for many people that came to Candles to hear Eva's story, this is as close as they ever have gotten, or probably ever will get, to Auschwitz. But Eva brought it alive in her talks. And so I thought this was a fitting place to start this Zoom session on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I normally do a 90-minute talk, very intensive, at libraries and some high schools. But today I'm going to do a reduced amount of the academic part of my talk, because when I've learned that to really reach people, to help them understand the Holocaust, it needs to get down to the personal level. And that is what was so important about Eva, is hearing her own personal story. And so later in this presentation, you'll hear me interviewing, and you hear people that went on the trips with Eva to Auschwitz or Romania, and I'll share some of my stories. And we're more the personal side and what it was like to really know Eva. And I hope this means a lot to you, and it's really important to me that people remember Eva, and she is very unforgettable. Another reason for me being here at Candles Holocaust Museum in Terre, Haute is I want to encourage you to come. In my previous talks, before we lost our dear Eva, I really didn't talk a whole lot about Eva in my talk. I was more about the Holocaust and then about my trips with Eva, but I would always tell people, come here and hear Eva tell her story. Well, sadly, we can't do that anymore, though you can visit with her virtually in the other part of the museum, and I'll give you a peek at that. So I would encourage you to still come to the museum. They're great exhibits. They're actually working on a new one about the Mengele twins right now. And so that's part of my purpose in coming here today, is to tell people it's definitely worth the trip to come to Indiana's only Holocaust museum. I earlier mentioned about, in order to make the Holocaust maybe a little more understandable, though it's hard to understand. The more I study it, the less I know I feel. But we need to make it more personal. And I want to give you an example of why you can get bogged down in numbers. I found this book, and with some people it's kind of a controversial book, but it's very, very thick. It's called And Every Single One Was Someone by Phil Chernovsky. And I say it's controversial because I'm going to open it up. As you go through this book, nothing changes. It's the same thing page after page. And what it is every single page is filled with the word Jew. 6 million times in this book, the word Jew. And each page has 4,800. There's 1,250 pages. And this kind of speaks to how the Nazis felt about Jews. They were the other. And there were millions of them, and they needed to be exterminated in their mindset. And so this book, after a while, you turn the page, and what you need to remember is you look this, if you ever see this book, and I'll show a close-up of this. It says here in the opening, look closer, focus on one Jew. Think of that word as one actual Jew, a relative perhaps, or a friend, maybe even yourself, a living, breathing person. And I will be showing you some pictures at Auschwitz. And one place where I noticed people actually became more upset than any place was in a part of Birkenau in the back by the last crematoriums back there. Is a place called the sauna. And that's where people were processed that weren't sent to the gas chambers, that would work there. What's called Canada, the warehouses, where they went through all the Jews' possessions, was right there near the sauna. And there is a wall there, and I'll insert a photo here. And that wall is just filled with photos that people brought with them. Many of them really did not know what was going to happen. They just were told they're going to be sent east, and they're going to have labor, and even if they thought the rumors were true, in their heart of hearts they were hoping that it wasn't true, and that they were going to be, even though it was going to be terrible, they could still be with their families, and they brought their family photos with them. So this wall was covered with photos, and I saw more people get upset there than any other place, because up to that point they're seeing buildings, they're reading signs, they're hearing stories, but all of a sudden they're confronted with individuals. You see people, he looks like a crazy uncle lifting people up, and you see a sweet family, or you see a child. You see a wedding picture. And so it helps to become more personal than thinking of the word 6 million in reference to a people that were targeted for genocide. So I think that's another important aspect of Holocaust education is, yes, understanding all of the huge numbers that were involved, but you just can't even fathom what that really means. And so let me continue, and I'll show you a little bit of the museum. I'm not going to show you every bit of it, but I'll just give you an idea of what it is. Well, we're here in the museum where you start your walk through Eva's life. And so I'm so thankful that in 2018 I was able to go to Romania to visit where her family home used to be. I got to be in the schoolroom with her, got to meet her friend Lucy, and I'll show you some photos around here. But one memory I'd like to share is when I came here, and I think it was something like 2012, and I was here at Terre Haute for a conference for people that had won Lilly Endowment Teacher Creativity Award. And so one of our field trips choices was one day we could come to Candles Holocaust Museum. And so I knew in advance it was coming, so I think I went ahead and got on Netflix or somewhere and watched Forgiving Dr. Mengele. I thought that would kind of prepare me. I really didn't know much about Eva whatsoever, but I had driven past this place before and thought, I wonder what that's all about. And so I came with maybe 20 other teachers and brought my camera, of course, and took pictures of people with Eva. Someone took my picture, and then I said to Eva, well, you know, I'm a twin. And she kind of went, oh, all the twins tell me that. And then she proceeded to start kind of this dark humor, this joke between us that only she could pull it off. I said, well, Eva, there are 2 sets of twins in my family. I have a twin sister, and then there's another set of twins 6 years younger, a boy and girl. And she said, oh, without batting an eye, she said, oh, Charles, Dr. Mengele would have loved you. And when I do that for my audiences, they either get like a chill or they kind of laugh, nervous laughter. And she just thought it was very hilarious. And so on our trips, I remember Krakow at, I don't know if it was in the airport before we got there, but I know at one point she pulled me aside, she goes, you know, Charles, Dr. Mengele would have loved you. And it just kept coming up. And so I know she did it, I can't remember for sure when she did it on our Romania trip in 2018, but she did find the opportunity to say it, and I go, you just have to say that every time. And she just, with her impish kind of look, she had, like I said, a wicked sense of humor. And I'm sure she had jokes like that with other people, but it was kind of a special one with us, and she even dropped it in an email now and then, but that was Eva.
So this is the family part of the exhibit, showing Eva's family, her sisters, and information about each of the family members. Then as you walk through the rest of the museum, you find out more background about the Nazi Party, about how ghettos were organized, and how people suffered and died there. There are some artifacts that are in the museum. There is a small amount about Mengele, but that is changing. There's a new exhibit being done right now. And then you learn about Eva and her road to forgiveness. It's a great museum, and I really highly suggest you visit.
Well, when you come to Candles, what's great is Dimensions and Testimony is a project of the Shoah Foundation at USC, and Eva flew out to California and for several days was asked thousands of questions with lights all around her, and she's waiting for you to talk to her. So let me ask her a question or two. Good morning, Eva.
Good morning.
How are you feeling today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Was it fun being a twin?
Just being a twin, in my opinion, is a tremendously big fun because people inadvertently, automatically always want to compare who is who. Have these fun games if they can guess or they cannot. So it immediately becomes a fun activity. And then, of course, in schools, we could fool the teachers, and we have taken a lot of advantage of being twins. And then when we got to be older, we also used it against boyfriends who had too many hands.
What was Dr. Mengele like?
Mengele was very pleasant looking. He had a gorgeous face, a movie star face, and very pleasant actually. He was maybe 5'9", dark hair, dark eyes, and the eyes were the focus. That when I looked into his eyes, I could see nothing but evil.
I'm Sarah Taylor from England. And the first time that I met Eva was on the 2015 trip, which was also happened to be the 70th year of liberation of Auschwitz. I remember getting to Krakow, and then obviously the first time that I really saw Eva was on our coach trip. We were very fortunate that she happened to be on our coach as we took about an hour's journey down to Auschwitz. And I didn't realise she was going to talk about her experiences on the way there. And she literally blew my mind away on the first hour. She just talked about everything that had happened, etc., as we drove down there. I was already mesmerised by how she'd survived. I had no idea of how much more intense that was going to become once we actually arrived in Auschwitz. What struck me about her was her love of children. She was much more at ease talking to children than adults. Not that she wasn't at ease talking to adults, but she loved, you could see the love coming out of her when she was speaking to children. And I remember my son actually, who was on the trip, saying to Eva, he asked him, they'd been having a conversation, a few of them, and she said to him, could you forgive? And he said, I don't think I could. And then explained, they said, right, that they got why she'd forgiven. And my son's always said, even now, he's 21 this year, and he still says that trip changed his life, changed the way he thought about everything.
So I often find myself reflecting on that trip and just Eva in general and the power of forgiveness. And I think about her most often when there's something heavy in my soul and I'm going, what is that anger? What am I holding on to? Is it serving me? And if it's not serving me, if there's no purpose for that anger that's going to make a better tomorrow, I think of her smile and just her mission as a survivor of Auschwitz. And Eva just constantly hit that home. I remember parts in our trip where she just took every moment she possibly could to educate and to comfort. We were outside of one of our special tours, specifically where she was being tested by Dr. Mengele. And there was a group of German, I think they were probably high school, maybe middle school age students. And she was talking to our group and then realized that they were kind of waiting around and openly welcomed and invited them to share her story. And just the tears and gratitude that not only our group had, but this unexpected add-on group had. And she just really took the time to impact as many lives as she possibly could. And it's definitely a lesson that I want to keep with me and hold dear. And she was just also so full of joy, too. I think this was the meal where we were at one of the museums and just were able to do traditional music as well and got to see, this amazing, joyful woman smile and dance. And she's a much better dancer than I will ever be. think anyone looks
You,
happy dancing.
you were involved because I have video of it. You were in a dance circle with Eva and Emmanuel. I didn't dance. I was taking pictures. That must have been a fun moment.
It was absolutely a fun moment, and I'm so glad you captured it because you can see it on my face of just I'm so present. And you're absolutely right. You don't, when you sign up for this kind of trip, you don't anticipate having such moments of sheer joy. And Eva like just constantly works that in, and so organically that I never felt guilty for the joy that I was experiencing.
On one of the trips, I noticed that Eva was struggling a little bit getting herself some coffee at the hotel in the morning. So I got up and I went over and I said, "Can I help you with that? Take that to your table." And she says, "Oh, no, I do things by myself." And at first I was taken back a little bit at that, but the more I've thought about that, it just really sort of represents her whole emphasis on perseverance and doing things herself and not giving up and just struggling through and doing things even though they're difficult. And that really resonated with me, and I really learned a lot from her in that moment.
So what did your students think about her?
She has this really great connection with children.
Right.
She would tell them point blank, I don't like boys who wear their pants below their belt and, they're sagging down the hall and all that kind of thing. And they would look at her and nod and grin and agree and just be very respectful. And, she really gave them some things to think about.
Well, I think one of the biggest memories that impressed me about Eva is how much energy she got when she was in Auschwitz. She was like, she might have been on the bus and talking and, she was always energetic. But when she put her feet on the ground and we were near the liberation photo, it was like all of a sudden you could just feel this positive energy. And you wouldn't, most Holocaust survivors won't even go back to Auschwitz. And here, this woman, it was like she fed off the place. It made her so energetic. It was just unbelievable to me. And this particular trip, it was raining, so she started singing in the rain. And it was just amazing how she could go from one emotion to the other.
And it was in Cluj, Romania one night. Our group was out to dinner, and I got my name changed that night to Steve. It happened because Eva's nurse at that time was Katie, and she kept calling me Steve, and I kept answering her, and I really didn't know that she was calling me Steve, apparently. And at that dinner one night, she was corrected that my name was Tim and not Steve. But ever since then, that dinner, everybody that's been on that trip kind of knows me as Steve, or sometimes Tim/Steve. It even carried on to June of 2019 when I sponsored the showing of the Eva's documentary. It was a great day that day. It was really special, and Eva was able to make it. And we had Ted Green along there that day, and Eva referred to me as Steve kind of jokingly that day, and Ted wasn't on the Romania trip, and he questioned if Eva knew my name was Tim and not Steve, and Eva said, well, he looks like a Steve. And so that's my story about traveling with Eva. I got my name changed to Steve.
Well, can you share with us a story or two? We've been talking for a while, and we both still get emotional thinking about the loss of Eva. That's for sure. But we have such great memories, don't we?
The one good memory that I have is I was struggling, telling her that I've always helped people and I've always helped others, and it's seen in the work that I did at a non-for-profit animal shelter. And I said, I'm getting burned out because it's such a thankless job and I don't know what to do. And she's like, have you worked on yourself any? I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she said, have you sat down and thought about how good of a person you are? How many people or animals you have helped? Even though I don't like animals that much, have you thought about how many you've helped? And she goes, but you need to take time for yourself. She goes, if you don't take time for yourself, you're going to deteriorate. And that really hit home. So I stepped down from my volunteer responsibilities. Sorry.
That's fine.
She helped me learn how to center myself so I can extend all that kindness that I have inside of me. If I didn't step back, I don't think I would be as willing to be as friendly or to be as helpful to everyone I come across. I think I would have just been in a shell, just in a tight little shell, and I probably wouldn't have branched out to where I'm at today. So it was at the screening of the documentary in Terre, Haute, around the first time that she saw me with my head shaved, and at the time I had a bunch of fun colors dyed in my hair, because again, the trip kind of made me come out of my shell a little bit, and that's something that I've always wanted to do. So she saw me, and she put her hand on her chest like this, and she's looking down and she goes, there's only your hair! What did you do to your beautiful hair? And I told her, I'm like, well, Eva, it's not as dramatic as it was in the past, but I would donate my hair every year to organizations that would create wigs for families and children for going through chemotherapy. And she goes, you do? And I said, yeah, I've done that probably for the last 10, 12 years. And then she goes, but why this? Like, she did this with her hands. And I'm like, well, why not? I said, it's hair, it grows back. The color can come out of it. So then the next thing she does is she goes, come here. So I lean over and she rubs her hand on the shaved part of my head. She goes, oh, that's so soft. And she's like, if you donate your hair, I can forgive you for shaving it all off and dyeing it fun colors.
That is great. Of all the people that I'm interviewing for my talk, you are the only one that actually was a volunteer at Candles. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did there?
Yes, I was a volunteer at Candles, and I loved it. It was probably the best job I ever had in my whole life. What I did, I kind of worked in the gift shop. I ran the register and helped people with their purchases. And I also did a lot of the computer work, not that I'm a computer genius. I was I just kind of did a little bit of everything. I did some of the tours through the museum and told about Eva's story. One of the most enjoyable times that I had with Eva working at the museum was when we would water the outside plants. And we had a little room that we went into and filled up our water buckets and put it on her walker and walked them out to the flowers. And one day, as we were filling up our water buckets, we always put Miracle-Gro in it, and we poured some on the floor inadvertently, and one of the other gals in the museum knew that we had done that and said, oh gosh, you guys need to put some of that on your heads, maybe you will grow. And because we're about the same height, and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed, and that was always a joke that we had when we watered flowers. She was so welcoming, she was so gracious. She loved people. If she could, she would have wrapped her arms around each and every person that came into that museum. She was so loving and kind and just, wanted to be friends. Probably those children are going to remember Eva for her kindness and for her story of when she was a child and ripped from her family and having to withstand so many different things, obviously, in her life, in her little life as she was when she was 10. I managed a Hallmark store, the Hallmark store that Eva went to purchase a thank you card to send to Dr. Munch after their interview, after their discussion. And I wasn't the manager at that particular time, but that is actually how I met Eva, was at that Hallmark store. And we became good friends. We would see each other there. We would see each other at the grocery store, and we'd carry on a conversation. And so that is basically how I came to go on the trip in 2013. Well, one particular day, she had her little cassette player with her cassette in it, and it happened to be the cassette, the actual interview of she and Doc Munch. He, of course, speaking in German, and she in English. And it was amazing for me to listen to his voice and her voice talking about what had happened at Auschwitz.
My name is Michael Wörle. I'm the grandson of Dr. Ottmar Freiherr von der Schür, the professor of Dr. Mengele. So I met Eva first in Warsaw, 1989. I remember a special situation in the bus. We went from Warsaw to Auschwitz. It was she was managing the things they had. She had to organize for the whole group, and the bus was driving on the motorway, on the speedway from Warsaw to Auschwitz, and the bus driver had to stop very suddenly, and she fall down like a tree. And I remember her face. She was without any motion in this moment. She stood up. Everybody was in sorrow. She had any pain or something hurted, but she stood up and made her job.
Oh, so she acted like it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was Eva. Oh, yes. It is a story that connects us, Charles, you and me, because I had been in the Nuremberg trial and in the Lüneburg trial with Oskar Gröning. Oskar Gröning was the man who was the accountant of Auschwitz, and his job was to collect all the money and things the victims brought with them to the concentration camp. I arranged the first contact, and we made many jokes together. And in this situation, it was very difficult to become the license to speak with him, because his lawyers had to accept it, and the judge for himself had to accept it, but it wasn't allowed to speak with him in the courtroom. He stood up, he fall down, he fall back, and Eva took one arm, I took the other one, and one of the guards hold him from the backside. So in this moment, I made a joke to Eva and said to her, "Eva, you rescued a Nazi in this moment," and she laughed. She laughed very, very loud. And after it, I had been there in her hotel. I visited her because I had a business meeting in the neighborhood. So I visited her in the evening. She was alone, and we talked a little bit about this trial now, because it needs a long time until the judge found him guilty. We talked about you, Charles, because you made a run for Eva.
Right.
And then we danced together, and this is a movie you can find in YouTube.
Right. I'm probably going to insert that in here because.
Shalom Aleichem, Avenu Shalom Aleichem, Avenu Shalom Aleichem, Avenu Shalom 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 Aleichem.
Run, Charles! Pay for Charles! Raise money for
behind her and all that.
Yeah.
That was fun.
And we did sing a song for you.
Right, right.
And another situation in Auschwitz, I had been there 5 times in my life, perhaps. I don't know exactly. It was there. I don't know. I don't remember what she did not like from my things, but she spoke very serious to me. Normally, she was very funny and kind, and she's for me like a mother. Okay. She is like my second mother. She is very important for me.
Well, thank you for joining me for this Holocaust Remembrance Talk, and I'd also like to thank Bartholomew County Library for inviting me to do this. I pre-recorded it just to make sure that you see this tonight. Sometimes technology doesn't always work out. I do want you to know that this video I'm putting on my channel, my YouTube channel, so if you just look up Charles Moman, you'll find this video if you have some friends you'd like them to see this. And I will add at the end of that video a short list of some documentaries and books about Eva and about the Holocaust in case you'd like to study more. I would like to highly recommend the Ted Green documentary that he did in conjunction with FYI and Micah Brown, Eva A7063, a wonderful documentary about her. So I highly suggest that. You may be able to find that online, maybe on Amazon Prime and some other places. Go search or look up Eva A7063 and get yourself a copy of this. And they're also available at Candles Holocaust Museum. Thank you for watching.
All right, Charles, we have some questions. Okay. First question, any idea when the museum will open again?
They keep.
I have an answer to that.
Okay.
I checked. It's February 19th.
Yeah, I knew they just announced recently that they're going to try it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
What prompted Eva to feel compelled to be an advocate for forgiveness?
Well, you heard Susie Crowder. She mentioned about a Hallmark store. I know some of the audio was a little hard to understand, especially Michael there at the end. But I hope you were able to catch most of it. She was invited to speak at a medical ethics convention in Boston, I think it was, and they said, "Could you bring a Nazi doctor?" That's what they actually. She said, "Well, I can't look up in the old pages to find a Nazi doctor," but she actually found Dr. Munch, and somewhere in Germany, and he was one of the over 100 doctors there at Auschwitz, but he wasn't involved with the experimentation part of it. And he would not come, but she could interview him. So she flew over to Germany, did an interview, and she was shocked to find out that he had nightmares about it. She thought every Nazi was all happy that they helped murder. Many of them were still happy the rest of their life, but he wasn't that way. And so when she got back home, she was talking to a dear friend. She said, "I need to thank him. What do you give a Nazi doctor thanking?" Because what he did, he gave a document. He went to Auschwitz with her with a document saying, "I was there," so the deniers could just try. Here's a doctor who was there. He would witness them dying, and he would sign a death certificate for all thousands that are in there dead. He'd have to wait till all the bodies were stopped moving. And so she gets a card for him. And so she jokes that it's hard to find a thank you Nazi doctor card at a Hallmark. And so once she did that, then her friend said, "Well, if you're going to forgive him, what about Mengele? What about Hitler? What about the Nazis?" And even though she was Jewish, she was kind of a non-practicing Jew, she took on a very Christian, and it's a Jewish too, a forgiveness. And she decided to do that, and she did it in a declaration with Dr. Munch, and she always said it was on her behalf and her behalf only. She didn't do it on behalf of anyone else. So she is very controversial among survivors, for sure, that don't understand that. They think she's absolving, but that's how she got this message with forgiveness, and that's why she's so powerful with children, because so many of them have terrible trauma in their life, and she's saying you can't change the past, but you can direct your future. And you can't forget, but you can forgive and go on. And so that's kind of how that all worked out.
Did Eva live in Terre Haute, and why is the Candles Museum there?
Yeah, she lived in Terre Haute. She actually worked in real estate for years and years, even after she opened the museum. And she ended up in a museum with her husband, Mickey, who she met in Israel. And he had a connection because when he was liberated in Riga, Lithuania. I think that's right. He became friends and worked with an army unit, and one in the army unit was a man from Terre Haute. And so he helped sponsor and get them to America. So that's how, of all places, they ended up in Terre Haute.
All right, that is it for questions.
Can I say one other thing?
You may say absolutely anything.
You saw there was that little delay with the speaking, but that's okay. When you go to the museum it's worth the trip just to do that virtual thing, because they literally asked her thousands of questions, and you can ask her anything. The only thing, she didn't respond to me. I couldn't help it. When I left, I just turned to her and I said, "I love you." And she just smiled and looked at me. And so I didn't expect a response. But the staff there, I feel sorry for them, because they worked with her every day and were so close to her. And recently I saw them, they mentioned that they go in there now and then to visit Eva. And they said lately they've asked some questions and they got some answers they had never gotten before. And so it was kind of interesting for them to still interact with Eva. And I think the Shoah Foundation, they're still tweaking the software, but it's pretty cool. You can ask her about anything, and there's a little hesitation, and then you can tell it goes to the computer and comes back pretty fast and gives you an answer. So it's really remarkable. And it was kind of bittersweet to be. I'd never asked her questions before. I'd seen it before, but I'd never interacted. So I thought that day was the day to do it. So it's really a neat experience and it's usually not crowded there, so you can sit there and just talk to the microphone and ask her questions. It's really neat. So if you get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. And thanks again for inviting me, and thank you all. I see a couple of faces I know. I saw Jim and Roger and a couple of others. So it's good seeing a few faces that I know. And I think I recognize some of you from the talks that I've done. But thank you for joining.
Thanks, Charles, so much. And Candles Holocaustmuseum.org is their website. And I want to mention that Charles doesn't charge for his presentations, but he does ask that a donation be made to the Candles Museum. And so our friends of the library will be sending a check to the museum on behalf of Charles. I want to thank everybody for listening. We do have some books and information about Eva at the library, so you're welcome to do that. Check them out. Just ask us and we'll take them out to your car curbside. And I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Stephanie. Have a good night, everyone.